Hi there, this is Matt Heffernan, and welcome back to my channel. On this episode of Slidey Vlogs, the number 25 now, we're going to be doing something a bit different, and it's not quite in the retro computing wheelhouse that we've been in so far, but it's still definitely retro gaming, because what I'm going to try to see is it possible for me to make Monopoly actually fun? So let's contextualize this a bit. So the reality is that Monopoly, the very famous board game, it's more retro than retro, right? We think of retro computing and retro gaming as going back to like the early 70s at the very earliest. And that's not really true. Obviously, gaming is as old as humanity. We've been playing games forever. And specifically with Monopoly, technically it's a modern game. This is not something that was played hundreds of years ago, but almost, because it was released, of course, in 1935 by Parker Brothers. And of course, Parker Brothers existed as a company for a very long time after that, until eventually, like pretty much every board gaming company that isn't some independent thing, it's been absorbed by Hasbro. And to this day, Hasbro, and going all the way back to Parker Brothers, they've sold more than 275 million copies of the original Monopoly. And that doesn't really even cover the full scope, because there's all these variants and special editions and everything. But of the core Monopoly game itself, it's clearly one of the most popular and successful board games at all time. The only thing I don't understand is why. Now, of course, I've played it a lot as a kid, but once you get down to it and start comparing it to other board games that have come out since then, and of course, video games, it's like, well, why is this game continually popular? Because, I mean, let's face it, it is not exactly modern looking at this point. It is very much dated to the Depression era. It came out right in the middle of the Depression in 1935, and it still looks like it. You still got Uncle Pennybags here, the mascot, or Mr. Monopoly, as he may be known in your country. And it is very obviously this dandy gentleman who was already kind of old fashioned in 1935, and now he just looks like some crazy relic. And the thing is that a lot of people do play it 2-player, but really you got to have 3 players to make it interesting, and really 4 players is even better. Uh, but still, I mean, interesting. It's a relative term, and definitely with 2 players, you get to the big problem is that games can last 3 hours or more, especially with a smaller number of players. You can hit a stalemate and just go on forever and ever. And the only way that it really ends is somebody makes what is ultimately an unlucky roll and lands on your boardwalk with a hotel and all that. And it's kind of lame, because eventually the strategies just start sapping out of it, and you just become a legacy real estate developer, and you're just kind of coasting on, as is the other person you're playing with, and eventually nobody goes broke. And so, yeah, no end to the game. And man, the thing is that even beyond all this, that original patent that was filed December 31st of 1935, it of course has expired since, and Hasbro no longer prevents people from making clones of Monopoly. And so I'm sure you've seen, like, maybe even your hometown, even if it's a really small town, has its own version of Monopoly. And, it's called like Smallvilleopoly or whatever. And it's like the brands become so diluted, but it's still popular. So people still want to play this kind of game. So how do we make it fun? How do we make a version of Monopoly that it's going to still attract the people that want to play a real estate trading kind of game? You're still doing this same kind of developing of real estate and building this little empire. But how do you make that fun? Well, the very first thing we got to do, we got to make it faster. This is not something that can take 3 hours. The target, I would say, is like most modern board games. And by modern, I mean really like since the 90s when the modern board gaming movement really started. Is that, nobody wants to play Monopoly or Risk for 3 hours. What they want to do is have a game that they can crank out in under an hour and enjoy that, and then maybe move on to a different game. So it has to be faster, not just in a shorter time, but faster paced. So how do we do that? Well, really, we got to simplify the mechanics. So there is so much going on in Monopoly. It's very complicated. There's all these weird transactions that you can do. And you really want to sort of limit those possibilities. And a big thing is removing the fluff. So things that don't really add to the game, like how much do utilities and railroads really add to the game? I don't say it's a whole lot. Let's concentrate specifically on making it about developing properties, the actual monopoly part of it. And I think that's how we could really make a fun version of Monopoly. And then the big thing is you're not stuck at a table anymore. You're going to get up off your butt and move, so that not just becomes a more interesting game because it's faster, it becomes a physical game. It becomes something that you're no longer tied to a table and a board. You're getting up, you're moving around, and just having more of an immersive experience. So how are we going to do that? Well, let me introduce you to Movopoly. Now, if you've been watching my channel for a long time, I've actually talked about this game before. And in fact, it's something that my daughter actually invented, and I've been helping her develop the idea. And she originally did it on paper, so little slips of paper that you'd carry around. But the mechanics of dealing with that became too difficult because it really, without a physical board, the mechanics become too difficult. There's no central control. So what can provide that central control? Well, of course, a computer can provide that central control. So we're going to make it a mobile web application. So rather than her original concept of just having real paper money and paper deeds and paper chance cards and dealing with all that, you just have everything on a mobile app, not an app that you install. It'll be an actual website, a local website on your local Wi-Fi. So that then somebody wants to come play the game, all they have to do is connect to your Wi-Fi and they can play the game with you. It's as simple as that. They don't need to have any special equipment other than those magical computers we already have in our pockets. And so it could be a phone, it could be a tablet, it could even be a laptop that they want to schlep around. So that's how it's going to work. And if you want to hear more about sort of the concept of the game and how it's going to work, I'm going to link you to my daughter's video on her channel. And we talk together about thinking through how the game would actually work. And the thing is that your house becomes the board. You are physically moving around your house so that different rooms in your house become the different properties. So you buy a room in your house and you're physically walking to that room. You have to walk into that room. You're rolling a virtual die and walking into that room and then deciding whether or not to buy it. And when you walk in there, then you know if it's available or if it is for sale from the bank. And once you do buy it, and then you group rooms or areas of your house together as monopolies, and then you can start developing on them. But it's much more scaled down because chances are you don't live in a gigantic, Downton Abbey type manse. You have a regular house or apartment with a limited number of spaces. And so that's how we really get this down to being simple, is there's just a few properties to buy up. You buy them up quickly and you're getting through them quickly. you're walking around the house, and you start to actually feel like you are there, and like, I own this, and then I am waiting for my turn, and I'm getting notified about everything on the phone. I'm doing all the trades on the phone, all the purchases, all the chance cards, everything's coming up on my phone or tablet, and I don't have to physically go to the bank. I'm effectively doing mobile banking on the run, mobile real estate transactions on the run. And and of course you'll run into people if you end up in the same room, and I can still have virtual interactions with other people through the app, and that's how it's going to work. And the main thing is that it's going to stay kid friendly. Kids are interested in adult type games, games that have adult type things in them. And like my daughter, who is currently 10, and I think she was maybe had just turned 9 when she came up with this concept, was that she really likes playing Monopoly, but it does take a long time. And it's something that her younger sisters can't really get involved in because it's just too complicated, and they get bored and run off. And this is something, it keeps moving, because you're moving quickly from turn to turn, person to person, and then getting through that game within a reasonable amount of time, because there's not that much property to buy up, and the game will be engineered for it to come to a quick resolution. And the really fun thing is that the game will be open enough that you can create different versions for each house. You can build a virtual board for that house and determine your own properties, your own costs for purchasing the property, and rents and developing, and all of that you can completely control, because of course it's going to be free and open source. I'm not looking to make a single dime from this. I am just looking to create something that is fun for me and my kids to play with, and also something that then I can share with a larger community. Use my platform here on YouTube to sort of expand the concept of it, and maybe even get some folks in the larger community to help contribute to the project and make it better. That's all good. That's everything that we want to do. So let's take a look at how we're actually going to do it. Of course, it's a web app, and we're going to need to have some HTML in here. And what I'm doing, again, we're going to kind of make it retro as far as a web app can be retro, but not in any bad way. Retro in the fact that I'm going to stick to a LAMP stack. So we're going to be Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP for the back end. And of course, the front end, though, maybe make it a little more interactive than that. This isn't just standard CGI bin generated pages. We're going to have dynamic HTML, although not with a capital D. So here I'm using jQuery and jQuery UI for creating a nice looking and responsive application. And then we can see here what I'm creating is a single page application, and all the different pages, all the different views of the site are going to be in this one big HTML document. Eventually the whole game will be contained in there, and we're going to have the CSS style sheet on top of the jQuery UI stylings. And then the actual client-side game logic, of course, will be in JavaScript, of course, heavily using jQuery. And I'll go through some of this code another time. But as you can see, we're just sort of doing, standard JavaScript type stuff. And then for the back end, here's an example of one thing. The PHP script for this one is actually for starting up a new game. And that's what we're going to kind of show, is the mechanics of this mobile website and how it's going to actually look. And so what we're going to see here, we can see within PHP, we can do a post or a get, and it works differently And yeah, so we'll take a look now at what this actual web looks like currently. This web app, it's very basic. The actual game part itself isn't implemented yet. This is something that I had a back burner for a while, getting involved in other stuff. But basically what you'll get is you will log in. You can see here I'm on a local host, and the mobile version would be a fixed IP address that I have. It's natted away from the internet, so it's not reaching out to the internet for playing it. It would actually all be running off the machine that you see here. That I am actually screencasting is hosting this whole game, so I can do localhost on this machine. But otherwise, I'm plugging in a IP address and getting to my sort of home internet page, and there'll be a link to Movopoly on there. But I will also have the ability for folks to have a QR code and be able to just have that printed out or coming up on somebody's phone, and somebody comes into the house, they get on our Wi-Fi, they then just zap in that QR code and they can get right to the game. And so that's what this is what they would get if they haven't played. If they have played before, there'll be a cookie on there. So it uses a cookie for identity management. Nothing real fancy, no crazy security. It's like, yeah, we're just going to use a cookie, and really a set of cookies. So here you can see, hey, I've been here before, and it asked me if this is still my name. I'm going to say yes for now. And then it asks, well, would I like to play a game? And currently in this screen, we would see if there's any games that have already been started. But there haven't, so I'm going to have to start a new game. And then it says, okay, well, let me name my game, and I'll call it Slithy Game or something. Who knows? And then I hit start. And then now you can see I just go to this blank screen. And that's because I haven't implemented anything, at least on the client side, beyond that. But if I do a refresh here, I'll still get that welcome back. And I say, yep, that's still my name. And now I'll see these games waiting to start. Is that Slithy Game that I created? Now, let's say somebody else comes onto my Wi-Fi, and I'll use an incognito window so that I'll be able to have a different set of cookies, and cookies that will also go away. And now I can click on Movopoly, and now you can see that same URL, but it doesn't welcome me back because it doesn't recognize me. I'm in incognito mode. I don't have that cookie. So now I'll give it a name, and I'll say my name is, well, I'll use Elodie because that's my daughter's name. And you can see we've actually used that before for entering this. Yeah. And then I hit enter, and now it says, hey, would you like to play a game? And Elodie could start a new game, or she could join that Slithy Game, but say she wants to start a different game. And she did that, and we'll call her game, she wanted to call a game Hoodie, so I'll go ahead and start that. And we get back to that same screen, and now we can see that there will be 2 games. If I just do a refresh, it says, yep, hey, welcome back, Elodie. Yep, that's still my name. And now we can see Hoodie or Slithy Game, and I could join either one of those and then get to sort of a waiting room where I can wait for at least one more person to join that game, and we can go. So they could either join Hoodie or Slithy Games, and then ultimately then there will be games in progress, and I'd be able to leave a game if we were taking a break, and then be able to come back to that. And that could be, months later. It doesn't matter. So that's ultimately how it's going to work. And then we could see, of course, here in MySQL, if I do a query for games, we're going to see Hoodie and Slithy Games. And then under players, we're going to run that query, and we'll see the Slithy Games and Hoodie are all in there. Eventually, you can see that we're doing separate games. And but of course we could see a Matt and Hoodie and an Elodie and Slithy Games, and they'd be separate rows in here. And that's how it keeps track, is that you could participate in multiple games. So say that your friend comes over and they can play a game, and then you can stop, and there's not like a whole big thing to clean up or anything. you can just pause that game and come back to it much later and be updated back on where your status is, and everything is still kept on the service until your game is done, and then it goes away off into the ether, and you can move on and play it again. And the nice thing is that, hey, if you had fun, you can just spin up another game immediately. No resetting everything, and no like sitting around one device to do it. Like even I played the Commodore 64 version with my friend of Monopoly a long time ago, and it was just as boring on the Commodore 64. And eventually we got to the point where we bought up everything and we reached a stalemate, and just almost like Homer Simpson when he had that Tim Bird just hitting the OK button over and over again. We effectively like taped down whatever button just did the default action, and it just kept playing for hours. And that's until eventually I think it came to a point where it needed some additional input, but still you won't have that problem with this because you're going to be engaged, you're going to be up and running, and literally up and running, and I think it's gonna be fun. So on my channel we'll come back to this, and on my daughter's channel she'll come back to it, and we'll each have our own updates on it. I'll have the updates on the technical end and the demos of the program with a little look behind the scenes, while my daughter will have more kid-friendly looks at it, and just talking about what it means to actually design a game, how a kid can design an actual game and have it come to reality, as long as she has, somebody like me for a father. All right. So that's it for this video. And what we're going to do, of course, is show the folks that we love the most around here, of course, that being our supporters on Patreon. So thank you folks for helping out. This is how I'm able to create nice free and open source projects like this, and still be able to, it helps with the expense of being able to run stuff like this, because it's not free. I do have to invest actual money in doing this, and the patronage goes a long way. And also the folks that subscribe via Patreon, of course, subscribing YouTube, always free. And if you're not subscribing, it doesn't cost you a dime to click subscribe and click that bell to be notified when the next video comes out. But if you're a patron, you'll know even sooner. You'll get ad-free access to that video as soon as it's uploaded, and be able to have a bigger channel of communication with me and really help guide the content of my channel and the direction that it's going to take, and learn more about some of these games that I'm developing, like Movopoly and like WordSlide, like we saw in the last Slidey game, so Slidey vlogs. So yeah, I'm really trying to focus more on getting some of these games that I've been working on completed, or at least making progress on them, while still doing the tutorial videos that you're probably here for. And I'm telling you, those are still coming, but I'm also going to have some games coming too. So I hope you enjoy all of that, and I will talk to you again very soon. All right, bye-bye.